This podcast is sponsored by Path to Publishing, helping authors to take control over their publishing journey for over 21 years. Visit pathtopublishing.com to get on the path to publishing your next book.
Welcome, everybody, to It's Truly Novel, the podcast where we talk about everything new on the internet. Here with me today is Joe Sands. Welcome to the podcast, Joe.
Thank you, and congratulations.
So excited to have you here.
Thank you.
And you are, from what I understand, a very talented vocal performer.
Yes, I do narrate audiobooks. I started a few years ago, and it's been an incredible journey. It really has.
So what is the most exciting thing about being a voice actor?
You know, getting to tell other people's stories is really interesting. One of the most challenging ones I'm actually working on now. I'm supposed to finish recording it in the studio this weekend. And it's actually a made-up language from another country. And so trying to find any background information was very challenging. However, I love the adventure. That it's a beautiful story. It's a mixture of this radical culture and love story all combined into one. And with the made-up language.
Well, that is indeed challenging.
That
but
it is.
We are actually here to talk about your new book, which I happen to be holding in my hot little hands. So it's Emotionally Constipated, and it is a book of poetry. Is that right?
Yes, it is. It's actually the pieces that I've written over the years through various, or either through or after various periods in my life that I compiled into just, a little chapbook, and I titled it Emotionally Constipated, Purging Through Poetry, because I kind of have this weird sense of humor. But I'm so proud. I'm so happy. I'm so excited to get to share it. I'm nervous at the same time because, you're very vulnerable when you're putting your work out there like that, especially me, because I'm a very private person. So
I think actually that's a trend. Most writers are actually pretty private people. And then we sort of strip off all that, that external stuff. We dance naked on the pages and we shove it out the door for other people to look at. We hold our breath and hope that they're kind.
That's a great analogy. I think that's, and it felt like that. It really did, because going back over it, you're actually reliving those events. And it's kind of crazy because like you'll read a piece and you're like, wow, at the time you're thinking, how am I ever going to get through this? And now, looking back, it's like, wow, I did that, like it wasn't the end of the world. The world didn't stop rotating on its axis because I had a problem or issue that day. I've had so many more since then, but when you're going through things, you feel like everything in the universe should just stop and acknowledge your pain or whatever it is you're going through. But life doesn't work that way. And when you finally get it, when you finally have that aha moment where you realize the world is not going to stop, life isn't going to end just because you have a bump in the road, then you begin to figure out, okay, you start strengthening your emotional muscles, I guess. That's what I had to do.
Well, I like the idea of purging through poetry, of getting that emotional blockage moved out of you by dumping words on a page and sort of sorting through and sifting through and finding the little, because poetry is just requires such a condensed form of language. It requires you to really nail down what it is exactly that you're feeling. There's not a lot of room. Like in a novel, you have plenty of room for expounding on a topic. Right. You can take pages or paragraphs, right? But in poetry, you don't do that. You have like one or two lines, maybe, really.
And I'm sorry to mean cut you off. I really like the way you said that because I never really thought about it like that, but you're absolutely correct. It's a limit. I guess when you think about when something you're going, whatever it is you're going through, it's almost like you have tunnel vision when you have a problem or a situation, and you can't really see or focus on anything else around you except whatever it is you're feeling at that moment. And so it feels good to just go ahead and get that out, vent it on the page. And I think more people should do that, and it doesn't have to make sense. Just get it out, like whatever, just get it out, and it'll make sense later, instead of leaving stuff bottled up inside. And yeah, sometimes it's, short, quick, to the point, but whatever it is, it's authentic in that moment because that's what you're feeling. And sometimes you may not even have the words to express what it is that you're feeling, but you figure it out by doing that dumping. So yeah, I like the way you put that.
Yeah, it's going through that emotional junk drawer, if you will, and tossing out all the contents, and then looking for the sauce packets that are still
Right.
good, and the napkins that are worth salvaging. And
Right. And why is and then you notice the things that you hold on to, the unnecessary things that you like. Why is it when you go through your junk drawer, you have those extra packages of ketchup and utensils from the fast food place that you never, why don't we ever throw those away? Like, you take your food out the bag and you get all the condiments and you just keep them and you never use them. You say,
Well,
okay, I'm gonna use this if we ever run out of ketchup. We got ketchup packets and you never use them.
my question is, why the dead batteries? Why do we hang on to those?
Why do we hang on to dead batteries? Like, are they going to resurrect themselves? Like, what are they going to do? Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's all the silly things that we hang on to, but I think we do that emotionally. Like we hang on to our emotional baggage far too long.
Yeah.
And then it begins to weigh us down.
We really do. And then, I think if we look at, like, when I look at the different generations in my family, there was a time when you couldn't express anything. You had to suck it up and keep going. And over time, you realize the effects of that, that was not always the best choice, And then you have those on the other end of the spectrum. Well, you're too emotional. You're always talking about your feelings and, life doesn't operate on your feelings. And so we walk that narrow, I guess when it comes to raising children, we kind of walk that fine line because we want them to be strong individuals and be able to express when something is bothering you. But we have to be able to teach them a method in which to do it so that you have a healthy relationship just with yourself, because if you don't have a healthy relationship with yourself, you can't have a healthy relationship with anyone else. And that's something that I had to learn. Like, after we go through a situation, whether it's divorce or anytime you're in any type of long-term relationship with a friend, even family members, things happen. And there's a grieving process, like after a divorce, that you go through. And if it's not handled well, then you'll carry that and you'll continue on with that and go into another relationship with that old baggage. And it's just not good. So being able to get that stuff out, like you said, is so important. It all falls under mental health. Since now everybody wants to talk, mental health is, there's no shame in mental health. Mental health and illness is a real thing, and this is just a coping mechanism. Hey, let's get it out and get it done with so you can move on.
I find, though, that most mental health issues really boil down to people avoiding dealing with their emotional constipation.
Like, what?
It becomes toxic.
Right. It does.
When you don't deal with it, when you don't get it out of yourself, just like if you were really constipated, right? There's a point where it becomes toxic to the system.
Absolutely.
Where you're backed up so much that
absolutely
it's poisoning you.
Right.
And emotions do that same thing. If you're backed up emotionally and you've never processed or dealt with that, it's going to poison you. It's going to poison your relationships. It's going to poison everything for you.
You become bitter, angry, and that has no place or space in any type of, new relationship, in any type of friendship. It just, I've been there, so I know what it's like to kind of isolate and wall yourself off, and you lose yourself into work, and you say, okay, I'm gonna just use work to fill the void. Sometimes people use food to fill a void, but we, like you said, we don't handle the things or get it out, and it becomes toxic to our system.
Mhm.
And it's good that we're in a culture now where we can actually talk about these things and talk about them in a funny way. I mean, who thinks emotional constipation? But that's exactly what it is. And like, I mean, that's exactly what it is. And um
Well,
I'm
I say that humor comes from looking darkness in the face so long that you have the opportunity to notice that it has pimples and bad breath. And that's
I
what
like
makes
that.
you laugh. It's like, this is not scary anymore. It's ridiculous.
Absolutely. I mean, whatever doesn't kill you make you stronger. And so, there's always a fear when we connect emotionally with anybody. I mean, when we strip ourselves bare and bare our souls to individuals, whether it's a friend or a mate, you're in a very vulnerable space. But I would much rather, the space I'm in now, I'm so happy that I've actually had the time and chance and space and experience to feel, love and hurt and joy, rather than to just wall yourself off, wall myself off and just be like, okay, well, I'm good.
Yeah.
You
In my
know, like,
experience, there are 3 normal reactions to getting hurt. The first reaction is to throw a stone back in the direction of the person that hurt you, but the problem is they've already moved on, so you usually end up hitting somebody who wasn't even guilty,
that's
who
true.
had nothing to do with the situation.
Right.
The second one is to take the stones that are thrown your direction and use them to build a wall, but that's like building a wall around a prize rose bush, right?
Mhm.
Yes, you're going to protect the prize rose bush from the dog, peeing on it and the bike trampling it. But
Right.
eventually you're also going to block the rose from getting the sunlight it needs to thrive and survive.
This is true.
And you will kill it. And the higher the rose grows, the higher the wall grows, the less sunlight's reaching the rose, the less attractive it is, the less it's being able to radiate that beauty out into the world. So in a sense, you're defeating the very purpose you set out to achieve. You're not protecting the heart, you're killing it.
Absolutely.
And the
Well,
third one is to stick the wound in a backpack and carry it around to the point where you can't move any further. Like you're blocked,
right.
right? You can't go
Right.
anywhere.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's it, being able to find the words to express how you feel when something is bothering you or someone's hurting you. It's so sad that we live in a culture where we we have to even deal with things like sexual abuse, molestation, rape. We have to deal with elders and deacons looking at people in the I mean, just the utmost scutterbutt stuff that we have to deal with. You would, when it comes to young people and children, that's the furthest thing from your mind. You want to be telling fairy tales about knights and castles and dragons and heroes and knights in shining armor. Those are the things that we want to be able to talk to our kids about and hope that they grow up and be healthy. But unfortunately, we live in a society where there are some deep, dark, seated thinking people, and these are the things that they sit up and think about. And so these are experiences that we have growing up that we have to deal with, that will later manifest in some way, shape, fashion, or form once we're adults, because we either didn't know how to deal with it, we couldn't protect ourselves. I'm just using, the abuse as an example. It's a shame that we have to even have these types of conversations, but we do, and that's the culture that we live in. And I think COVID, with everybody being shut down and everything having to be just still for a moment, once we opened up and people started interacting again, you would have thought that it would have been a kinder, gentler nation. Didn't happen. Didn't happen because all that suppressed stuff started coming out. It just started coming out. I mean, as soon as we get out, what do we have? Like George Floyd. We had all kind of crazy stuff going on. I mean, it's just crazy, you know. Hopefully, you know, writing as a tool, as a mechanism for anyone with any type of issue, hurt, pain, anger, frustration, you know, get a piece of paper, get a post-it note. I keep post-it notes all the time, and just, you know, write it out, you know, just whatever you're feeling, just put it out. And you know, maybe that'll keep you from going and shooting up somebody. Like, why in these United States of America do we still have people walking into a supermarket shooting up folks? Like, that is beyond reasoning to me. Like, why do we devalue human life so bad? I mean, yeah, we're going to have issues and we're going to have hurts and pains, natural experiences. That's normal anyway, because, you know, we're human. But we've gone so far left, it makes no sense to me. I don't even know how I got on that issue.
Oh no, it's fine. Well, it's about emotions, right? It's about the way we don't deal with them, and what happens when we don't. Is that totally innocent people being caught up in our own drama, in our own pain, because we can't even see them.
Right.
It's like we become invisible, you know, we become blind to anything except our own pain.
Right.
I think that's the real danger. I know for me, it was certainly something I had to confront in myself, coming from a background of abuse, that quite often I realized I was carrying my pain and it was all I could see. I couldn't see anybody else because all I could see was my own pain. Right. And as a result, I was trampling on other people without intending to.
Right.
It's like, you know, and human beings are very good rationalizers, so very good justifiers. And so we always justify our own behavior as reasonable. We're the hero of our own story 100% of the time, even when we're actually the villain of the story.
Right.
So, well, and I think that we have to. Oh, go ahead.
No, a part of it is trying to regain your power, you know, get your power back. Because when you go through something like that, you feel like you feel helpless, like you've lost your power. And so anytime you have an opportunity to feel like you've regained your power, like, okay, I am in control of me in the situation and nobody's going to hurt me, nobody's going to bother me, nobody, you know, it's sometimes you don't see, you don't see when you're hurting other people or when you're blocking other people out. You really don't. And it's good to be able to get to a point where you can share that and help someone else to get through, because it's when you're navigating through it, it's so dark, you know, it's so dark. And like you said, you can't see the forest. you just can't.
Yeah, you're
so to see
focused on the path in front of you.
Right. So to in order, in the beginning, I was so nervous about sharing some of these pieces. And I had someone to tell me, they're like, you know, you just look like nothing ever happens to you. Like you're just good all the time. And like, just like, were you born with a silver spoon? I'm like, what? I didn't have a copper spoon. What are you talking about? I have a stainless steel. What?
No, I had the plastic spork. I didn't even have what are you talking about, silver spoon? I had the plastic spork, and a few tines were broken off of that.
I was like, no. But I get it. You know, I told him, I said, I get it. And, you know, I was kind of like the pot calling the kettle black. You got to lead by example. And one of the things I would always say is when we would do ladies retreats and things was for the ladies to share. You know, a lot of times you'll sit next to someone and you never know their story. You never know what they're going through. You never know what their experiences have been. And they could have gone through something that you're currently going through, and you don't know how to navigate that situation. But you have someone right next to you, been there, done that. You know, sister, let me help. Let me tell you what I did. You know, this is how you get through that. And this is what it looks like on the other side. So yes, this is what it looks like on the other side of divorce, multiple. This is what it looks like on the other side of, you know, abuse. This is what it looks like on the other side. And there is another side. There is another side.
I will agree. I mean, there's always another side, right?
Yeah.
And when you first came through it, I remember how angry I was. Just angry at the whole world. Angry at the man who hurt me, angry at my mother for failing to protect me, angry at teachers for failing to notice the behavior that should have tipped them off, angry at, you know, everybody for not noticing, for not observing, for not seeing. And I think part of it, though, was a real anger at myself for not being able to stop what happened from happening, you know, like being too weak to, even though I was the one who eventually turned him in and made him go to prison, it was like before all the things before that when I couldn't stop it.
Right. You felt like you lost your power. You didn't have any power. And what's crazy is on the outside looking in, if you were that teacher, if you were that parent, what does it look like? And I think we have a responsibility now to help people to understand what it looks like. What does that victimization look like on the outside looking in? So when you know, is that person's demeanor different? You know, are there any telltale clues or signs that they can look for that, you know, maybe they didn't see or notice, but were so obvious, of course, to you? Because I guarantee you it's happening. It's still happening. It's happening to somebody right now. And it's like,
well,
how do we spot that, you know?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I would tell you is it's so funny because on the witness stand, this tends to lead to testimony of sexual abuse being dismissed. But pathological lying is actually a key indicator of deep-seated trauma happening behind closed doors, because that stuff doesn't perpetuate itself in a family that tells the truth. You know, if you're encouraged to tell the truth all the time at home, you don't perpetuate lies. But a dysfunctional family lives on lies. Everybody's encouraged to participate in the lie. Everybody's basically blackmailed into continuing to participate in the lie so that the family doesn't get caught out, right? So that mom and dad are protected, but it's at the expense of the kids.
But then wouldn't that mean that the parents would actually have some type of knowledge of what's going on?
At least, no? Well, there's this weirdness to it where there's there's the perpetrator who definitely knows what they're doing. Right. They know.
Yeah, we know they know.
But the other parent is often a codependent in it. Like they may be turning a blind eye to it. They may be refusing to believe it. They may be living on denial, whatever they're doing, but everybody is supposed to participate in the denial. Nobody's allowed to acknowledge the truth. Even though everybody may see it, you're told that's not, it's the gaslighting thing. It's, you're not seeing what you're seeing. That's not really happening.
So for the powerless youth and all of that, there's that feeling of hopelessness and defenselessness, and then the shattering of roles, because when you're young, you idealize adults because they're your heroes, they're your protectors. And when you have one of them to violate or cross those boundaries of a young person, I think it shatters you forever.
Oh, it does.
I think it shatters you forever. I think any person who violates a young adult ought to be, I mean, they just, they don't need to be here.
Well, I will say that people can change, can grow, can become different people if given the right chance, but they don't need to be in that home environment with those children they're traumatizing.
Absolutely
Definitely
not.
need to be
I think there
taken
needs
out
to
of
be
that and totally pulled away and rendered unable to touch another child.
severe consequences. I to the fullest extent, I do believe that, because for the perpetrator, whether it ends or stops at that particular child is inconsequential. What the damage that is done to that child, and the therapy, the reprogramming that has to occur the rest of their lives. I mean, I know, people who have confided in me that even their own mothers don't know that they've had these type of issues, and it's like um they could never say anything. Most of them were men, and you would never think, but when they express this load that they carry, it's so painful, and it's so heartbreaking to see. And I'm an empath, so I have to make sure that I set up boundaries, because I feel everything. And so to hear some of their stories is just heartbreaking, and it's just a shame. Just if the cases were actually reported, it would be astounding. But a lot of times this stuff isn't reported. Like you say, you're not supposed to talk about it. You say that you're delusional. Oh, that's not really what's going on. And then from a woman's point of view, a woman who has been waiting to be with this man or have this man in her life, especially if she's a single parent, and now you got this mate, and you don't want to believe that the man that you brought into your house, into your circle, could actually do something as deplorable as touch your child. That denial, there's some women that just deny it altogether. There are some that just get outraged, and it's the burning bed 2.0, but it's just sad. It's sad. It's sad. It's sad for the woman who has to deal with it and think it's her fault, because this is the person that she chose to bring into her life and into her environment. It's sad for the child who has to suffer, because now you don't know what's about to happen. If nothing's done, then like, who is my protector? And then for the creep who did it,
Yeah. Well, in my case, it was my stepfather. And I was 4 when he came into my life, and I was 9 when I sent him to prison.
Good for you.
I told my mother when I was 7, and nothing happened. So I told the guy at 9, and that time she went to the police. But she never came back and checked.
Right.
She never asked the next question, right? Never
Right.
followed up. And I think that was a case of almost not wanting to know.
Right.
Like you can pretend that everything's okay as long as you don't ask the question.
Or could some of it have been just, the shame and embarrassment? Like, what do you say to your child? I'm not making excuses for her at all, but just the devastation of knowing, like, this is my baby. What do I even say? You know what I mean? Like, what do I even say? And maybe she just didn't have the tools. Maybe she didn't have the tools, but kudos for at least taking those steps to get him prosecuted.
Yeah. I mean, I will respect her for what happened at 9. I mean,
but there was some healing with you that needed to have been done, because it's just like, you can't just say, it's not like he stole a piece of candy out of a store and you report the burglar. No. You had some things going on for years at a time that was emotionally, damaging. And so who was there to look after your emotion?
Yeah. Well, and there was nobody really.
Right.
I mean, it was me. And you're right. The effects of it are devastating across an entire lifetime. It's, I'm still finding bits and pieces of myself that need to be like put together, that aren't operating the way they should be in part because of the things, and because it happens so early, especially.
Right.
That's a double whammy right there. The earlier it happens, the harder it is to get that early programming fixed, so to speak.
I feel like when you violate a child, that innocence, something breaks in you, and you can't. There's no super glue in that back. It breaks. How it heals, if it heals, you know, time can only tell. But you will never be that same innocent child again,
Oh,
ever.
no.
You will never see adults the same, men the same. Something in you breaks, and for the people who, if you're watching this and you thinking about messing with young people, know what you're doing. You're destroying a life, and it makes no sense to me. It just makes no sense to me.
Well, I think there's this dissociation that goes on in the perpetrator's mind. The child, well, first of all, there's really poor psychology out there that was promoted heavily in the 60s that said that children are sexual creatures and want it, and all it, they're just waiting for an adult to bring it out of them. And I'm not kidding, this is out there. It's awful, and it's absolutely not true. And it was based on I think it's Alfred Kinsey, I think it's his name, and he did research on pedophiles, prostitutes, and poor infants.
Wow.
It was, but this has been perpetuated in psychology to the point where there are people who genuinely believe that a child wants sex. That all it has to do is an adult, coax it out of them, and poof, they're going to realize how sexual they are, and they're going to want that, instead of realizing that it's just such a traumatic and devastating thing to have happen to you.
And see, I think that's I so totally don't agree with him. I believe children are innocent, and
Yes.
it takes, for someone who has full knowledge of what they're doing to an innocent child, there is a time when your body will naturally develop into that, and those hormones will develop, but you're not mentally or physically capable or aware of what you're doing. That's why I say, when that happens and those boundaries are broken, something against nature is disturbed in that young person, in your mind, in your spirit, because that is not supposed to be happening at such a young age. And so it distorts everything in you. Some young people, they become over sexualized, and they don't understand why. Oh, you're just fast. Well, when uncle was messing with you when you were 10 years old, you know what I mean? Like, you don't know what those emotions are. You don't know your body. You don't know any of that.
What you learn when you're molested as a child is that your value is based on your body. And so you learn to trade your body to get what you want.
Well, and if you do this and don't say anything, you won't get in trouble. No one will find out. You won't be embarrassed. There's this unnatural, unreal, false trust that's built. So you have this false relationship between you and your perpetrator. And so that's why a lot of times, these perpetrators feel like, oh, these kids, they just love me. They, they're not going to go anywhere. But that's the manipulation in it all. And my thing is, how sick of a person do you have to be that you're not man enough or even woman enough, because there are women out there that do the same thing, to be with an adult? Why do you have to mess with an innocent child?
I think precisely because they are innocent, because they will accept without question, because they are so open to what somebody who is in a position of authority tells them and teaches them, that they feel like they can mold them. Now, I had the fortunate thing that I was an avid reader. And a lot of what I read was, Joe's Boys and that kind of thing where I started to get a picture that our family was not normal, that what was happening in our family was not normal. This was
Right.
not how families were supposed to operate.
Right.
And I think that's why I was the one who stepped forward and said something, because it was like, no, this isn't how things are supposed to be. Something's very, very wrong here.
Right.
And so even though the first time that I told, nothing happened, I persisted in trying to find someone who would listen,
Right.
because I had that sense that this isn't how things are supposed to be.
Right. And that's what your innate nature as a human being, even though you may not have had the words or you knew anything about social or familiar dynamics, you knew that wasn't right. It didn't feel right. It wasn't supposed to be happening. Not at that time. It just wasn't. So to say kids are naturally sexual human beings at an early age, that totally disproves that theory, because something about this is not right. You may not have been able to articulate exactly what was going on or how, but you knew that it wasn't right. And you regained your power by saying something. You didn't lose your voice. You actually found your voice, if you think about it.
I did.
And how brave of you to do that, because most people would have been scared. They're adults scared to death to say anything.
Well, I will say that it helped that my mother did the second time, at least.
Good deal.
Take action. That helped.
Good deal.
What also helped was, I think my Christian upbringing also helped, because, being taught from an early age that the truth is important.
Right.
Even if we weren't living it at home, I was hearing it in the pew, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
and a lot of that's happened, a lot of that's happened. And it's sad that even in the church that we even have to have that conversation, but it's with church folk, religious folk, you have those same problems. And it's sad that we even have to talk about it, but it does happen, it happens. And so it emotionally, it's damaging, but there's always that truth, and finding your voice and speaking out. You have to just keep speaking out, and if you can't speak out at the moment, write it down to get it out of you, because the more you suppress and suppress and suppress, and sometimes it's hard, especially when you are in a community of people who, everybody knows everybody, especially when you grow up in a religious family and you have someone in the church who does something inappropriate. In my situation, it was like that. It was someone in the church that did something very inappropriate. It was a preacher, as a matter of fact. And so I was 16 at the time. I was 16 or 17. I think it was 17. And so I had to tell my family about it. And at first, they were just in shock and disbelief, because this person was, everybody just loved this person. They've been a minister for years and years and years. And it was just, it was a shock. It was a shock to me, of course. And the whole time I kept thinking, well, you know what? His wife is elderly, these are elderly people. If I say anything, is she gonna have a heart attack? And then I'm be responsible for her dying if something happens. So all this crazy stuff is going through your head, because you're young, you don't know what to think. And I told my family, and my dad, he was my hero. He was my absolute hero. He handled the situation, and it was handled the way he did it. I didn't understand it at the time. As I got older and he explained everything to me, as far as, what went on, behind closed doors, I understood it better. But he came back and he shared that story at a retreat. I didn't even know he was going to bring it up. He shared that story in front of everybody at a family retreat that we were having. And we were in this workshop, and Dad was teaching the class, and he said, he mentioned that situation, and it just floored me because it's been like how many years ago, like 30 something years ago. And he said the one thing that really bothered him the most was in that moment, as a Christian man, he almost felt powerless. He's like, I want to be able to protect my daughter. I can't kill this man. I can't beat him to a pulp, you know. But it was the fact that, to me, for me, he believed me. And that was the validation that I wanted. I wanted someone to believe me, protect me, check on me, make sure I was okay, and he did that. Anytime we were in any type of situation where this person was near, my dad was always right there by me. I would never leave his side. He'd just always be there. And that made me feel really good. It was still damaging in the fact that, this is a person that everybody loved and trusted. Like, you're a preacher. What you doing? What you doing? And like, this stuff isn't supposed to happen. Like, what are you doing? And yeah.
Well, it's a sad thing but it's also true that most people have this imagination that a sex offender is going to be somebody that's unlikable, that you can detect easily. That
they're gonna have a ski mask on.
Yeah,
they're gonna look like the burglar. No, they don't.
But they don't. In fact, they're very charismatic and they're master manipulators. They're very good at winning your trust, at breaking down barriers. And one of the things you should be looking for is, do they respect your boundaries? Because that is one thing they will not do. Like if a parent tells their child, no candy, right? You can go visit Joe Bob, but no candy.
Right.
Joe Bob is going to whip out that bag of candy and go, I know your parents told you no candy.
Right.
But I got all the candy you need. And then some, you just got to come sit on my lap,
Right. Look, that sounds like Satan in the garden.
Right. Exactly. So they're master manipulators. They know how to win over it. They know how to spot the child that has a need.
Right.
That's being unmet by parents or whatever. They're very good at spotting the vulnerable child, at appealing to the vulnerabilities, because a strong child, a child who feels loved at home, who's got all the attention they need, is going to be like, you're weird. Yeah. I don't like you.
Right. What are you
I don't want to have anything to do with you.
Right.
Okay? But the vulnerable child is looking for a place to belong. They're looking for attention. They're hungry for it. And so that predator, like all good predators, right, senses the weakness and uses that to win the child over, leverages that weakness. And so the child then becomes almost blackmailed because they're encouraging him to break the rules. They're encouraging him to defy the authority that they know they should follow. And then they say, well, you don't do what I say, mom and dad are going to find out. Or nobody's going to believe you.
So it's like they make sure that they isolate you, kind of like an abuser in any
it's very much like an abuser
domestic relationship, where they want to isolate you from the family. They always want to make you, it's either them or the family. And it's so crazy, how they'll want you to not have as much communication. They want to be the center of your world. Why you always got to call your family? Why you always got to talk to your family? We're right here. And the more they isolate you, the more they can mold and shape your world, and into what.
The more they isolate you, the more control they have.
Yeah,
that's what it amounts to. And the less bridges you have to use to walk away. And they know that.
And so you feel like, there's no one but them, like, this is my bed, I got to lay in it, and so here I lie. But that's not, that's not the case. But that's what you see when you're in it. That's why I say when you're in situations, it's hard to see anything else, but it's crazy how life is. You'll, even through the most traumatic experiences, there's always that crack. That's something. There's a crack in the window. There's a moment. There's a light where you can escape at some point. It may not be immediate, but it happens, it happens. And what happens when you step into the light is that's the big question mark.
Yeah. Well, I think that most people, there's a point where you become afraid of the light almost because you're afraid of what you'll look like, afraid of your own brokenness. Like if I step into the light and I have to look at all the broken spots, it'll be really ugly. But the beautiful thing, especially if you're walking with Christ, is that he can, there's this art form in Japanese culture called kintsukuroi. And it's where they deliberately shatter a pot and then they
I've
glue
seen
it
that.
back together with precious metals.
Yes.
And it becomes very beautiful. It
Very
becomes
beautiful.
stronger than it was to begin with and very, very beautiful.
And even more valuable.
Yes, and even more valuable because now it's also one of a kind. There is no repeating it, right? And I think we can tend to become afraid that our pasts have ruined us, that we're unfixable, unhealable, that we are no good anymore. Who's going to want us now that we're broken? Who's going to want us now that we're shattered? Who's going to want us now that we're no longer pure, right? Well, the reality is that there will be somebody who will value you.
Absolutely.
Somebody who will see the courage you had, because it takes courage to pick yourself up and put yourself back together again. It takes courage to step into the future and say, no, that's not who I'm going to be. You don't get to define me. I'm going to choose to define myself and to refuse to allow the past to become the thing that defines you anymore.
Absolutely. Because you have to do it for yourself first. Like you have to do it for yourself and love yourself and reconcile with yourself first instead of expecting it from the next person, because you're not healed enough yet. You got to heal you first, because if we think that someone else is going to come and do a complete healing of us, it doesn't happen that way. And sometimes we try to do that, like we'll be damaged, and instead of taking the time to love on ourselves a little bit more, kind of figure out what our triggers are, forgive ourselves, forgive ourselves for everything that we even feel any inch of guilt about. And it's a process. But at least when you come into another relationship with someone, you can start from a place where you're balanced and not, kind of off kiltered, because you're still trying to figure out and question, why, why am I like this? Why am I feeling this way? Like you said, the depression and self-doubts of, why did this happen to me? Will anybody love me? And then when someone comes and pays you a compliment, it's like, oh my gosh, this person loves me. Oh, you good. But then if you're not healed within yourself, and you're going to expect that person to be everything that the other situation wasn't, and you will literally just suck and drain them dry and not have anything to give back in return, because and that's a selfish thing and a selfish way to be. So yeah, I think emotional healing is a continual process that we all have to, at each stage, continue to be mindful of. And we can have some beautiful relationships and beautiful friendships, and it makes us kinder, gentler people and more understanding people.
Yeah, and I think your poetry is a great method of doing that. Like dumping out that emotional garbage.
Dump it. Just
sorting it through it and taking from it the beautiful and discarding the garbage. Because there is something beautiful that comes out of every trauma.
Absolutely.
Even if the only thing beautiful that comes of it is your ability to help somebody else through it, that's still worth it.
Yeah.
Like I've had people tell me, oh, I'm sorry that happened to you. And I'm like, well, I'm not sorry it happened to me. Would I choose to repeat it? Probably not. But,
but it's part of your story. It's part of your journey.
Part of my story.
Yeah.
And moreover, because I went through that, I have more compassion for people who are going through that journey. I know more about what they're going through. I know more that somebody who's constantly lying to you probably has been through something traumatic and isn't dealing with it and
Right.
may need help, right? So I'm less likely to judge them for where
Right.
they're at in their journey, and more likely to ask myself, okay, well, what can I do to help them
Right.
get past that? So it has been a stronger person, a better person, and a more compassionate person.
And I
You know,
think because you are so well spoken and you aren't afraid to talk about your journey, teachers, parents can so benefit from listening to just some of the things you went through and some of the telltale signs that you can look for, because a child isn't going to give you that information.
I don't know that information.
They don't know. Only an adult who's been through it can say, hey, when this was happening, I behaved this way. This is something that you can look for. Maybe this is a telltale sign, or this is a telltale sign or indicator, or keep your eye on this, particular situation or area of behavior. If you notice some changes, or this is what it looks like, this is the face of what it looks like, so that you can kind of have an open mind and an open eye. And when you do discover that a young person is being abused, especially if it's in your own home, as a parent, what the child is looking for, what the child is needing from that parent. Because as an adult, if your child came to you and said, Brandy, mommy, this and this happened, of course you're going to automatically go back to remembering what happened with you. But you also have that know-how already of what the child feels like and what that child needs in order to move forward, because you've been there. And that, I think that's a key piece that parents miss out on, what the child needs from them in order to move forward. So even if we identify that there's a problem, if we prosecute the perpetrator, it's still not over. That there's something else that has to be handled. And if it's not handled correctly or the right way for that particular young person.
And I will say that the young person has likely developed an emotional attachment to the person who's abused them. Right. So condemning that child for having that emotional attachment or getting angry with them for that is only going to hurt them. Right. Like, I didn't want my son to be. That's all I want. I didn't want to be angry with him. I didn't want to hate him. I didn't want any of that. And I kept having adults tell me there was something wrong with me because I was not angry or hate. So we're back. I kept having adults tell me there was something wrong with me because I wasn't angry with him. There was something wrong with me because I didn't hate him. I needed them to give me the room to process all of those things.
Well, you can't. You're a child. You don't know, and when you're young like that, and an adult is telling you to do things, you're going to do what that adult tells you to do because it's an adult, and you're
especially when they're in a parental role.
Right. And so it's like, I've seen situations, and I've been in situations where, family members like, well, I can't believe, you did that. I'm like, I was 2 or 3. How did I know? I didn't know. I don't have reasoning at 2. Who has reasoning at 2? That adult should have known, not me. And so, but when you're first hearing it, you feel dirty. You feel like, oh my goodness, what did I do? Why didn't I? But you're 2, you're 7. Mm-hmm. What do you know at that age? So, I had to learn to not. It took a while, it took a while to, but the sad thing is that stuff still follows you. The word still follows you, even into adulthood. They follow you. And then it's up to us to figure out how it's affecting our adult lives and our
Oh yeah.
relationships with other people, you know, and so that we don't carry that, like you say, continue to carry that baggage, because the weight, you keep adding stuff and adding stuff and adding. I mean, life is enough as it is, everyday living. But to continue to drag stuff from the past and add all that stuff to it on a daily basis, that's a lot. It's a lot.
It is a lot. And what I find is that those people who do that inevitably are unable to enjoy and appreciate the current relationships they have because they're
Right.
too stuck in the past. They can't move forward. My grandfather is a perfect example. I loved my grandfather to death, but he was so bitter over the past and the things that had happened to him in the past that he really couldn't enjoy the relationships he had in the present. He couldn't appreciate them or be present for them because he was stuck in the past. And I think that's one of the reasons why I recognize that that wasn't who I wanted to be. Like, I didn't want to be stuck in the past.
I think that's beautiful that you said that you recognize that that was not the person you wanted to be, which further lets, me know that you can always reinvent yourself. You can always recreate yourself, and you can be whatever person it is that you envision yourself to be. So once you envision who it is that you want to be, if you say, you know what, I want to be a healthy person, I want to have healthy relationships. And, even if I'm not ready for a relationship, I want to have a healthy relationship with myself and be in a better place. Now, what is it going to take for me to get from point A to point B? Because it does take work, but you'll
Yes.
eventually get there when you do your work. You really will. But it's having that foresight, like you said, and making that commitment to yourself that that's not the person I want to be,
Yeah.
that's not me. I think that's beautiful.
This marks the end of episode 1 with Jo Sands and her new book, Emotionally Constipated. I'm your hostess, Brandy M. Miller, with It's Truly Novel. Please join us in episode 2, where we continue to discuss poetry and all the things that get us emotionally bound up. As always, if you like this episode, please like and subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell to be notified when new episodes release. And if you know someone who could use a little relief from being emotionally constipated, please consider sharing our video.